Historic meeting in Cuba. How the president's Cuba visit is received in the Catholic community. Ties to Israel. Presidential candidates defend their positions, including one who caused a controversy. Terror survivor. A Yezidi woman shares her story. And praying for the Little Sisters of the Poor. Their message to the Supreme Court. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, March 21st, 2016. A marching band marks the beginning of a new relationship as the presidents of the U.S. and Cuba meet face to face. Good evening on this Monday. I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for joining us. President Obama's meeting with Raul Castro in Havana is the first U.S. presidential visit to the island nation in 88 years. As President Obama tries to improve relations with the Castro regime, the U.S. is easing travel restrictions to Cuba. More U.S. companies can now do business with Cuba, everything from hotels to internet to agriculture.
Our growing engagement with Cuba is guided by one overarching goal: advancing the mutual interests of our two countries, including improving the lives of our people, both Cubans and Americans. That's why I'm here.
Today is Obama's first full day in Cuba. He arrived with the First Lady and the First Family Sunday aboard Air Force One. They later walked around Old Havana, touring the building that was the seat of government in colonial times. Dozens of so-called ladies in white were arrested after attending Palm Sunday Mass, hours before Obama arrived. The women are relatives of political prisoners. They staged silent protests after Mass every Sunday. Our chief White House correspondent Lauren Ashburn is traveling with the president, joining us now from Havana. You were there when Obama and Castro delivered their statements. Describe that scene for us, if you would.
Well, buenas noches, Brian, from the city of Havana. It's absolutely beautiful here, but also a city in contrasts, and we can talk about that in a minute. Yes, it's also blustery. I'm a little chilly, and it's a little cool, and that's exactly what it was like when the two of the leaders were talking. You saw the tension that was between them. President Obama tried to be very open and friendly, but a question was asked by a CNN reporter about political prisoners. And as soon as that question was asked, you could see the demeanor of Raul Castro change, and he said, "Give me a list," in Spanish, of political prisoners. And at that point, things did become tense and a little bit uncomfortable, Brian.
We're going to talk more about that question and answer with Ana Quintana of the Heritage Foundation in a moment. What are Catholics saying about the visit?
Well, Brian, I had the privilege yesterday of going to Palm Sunday Mass at a small church, not the grand cathedral where President Obama went. And it was very much like celebrations we see here. You had people with palms processing from outside the church, inside the church. And every Catholic I talked to outside of their homes said that this is a wonderful opportunity for the United States and for America to join forces. However, when you talk to them privately, they say that the Castro regime has not done a lot to help Catholics. And as a matter of fact, some Catholics are converting to another religion simply because Catholics are under fire.
Well, we saw the ladies in white being arrested after Palm Sunday Mass. Did the White House mention that at all? Was there any surprise about those arrests?
I asked Ned Price, who is the spokesperson for the National Security Council, as we were on a bus over to hear the press conference, and he said he doesn't know why that they did it. They didn't know that he was going to do it. And he also said, well, it's Sunday, meaning they're arrested all the time, and that is not surprising that it would happen on that Sunday.
Lauren, Americans can now get visas to visit Cuba. From what you've seen, is Cuba ready for an influx of Americans?
What a great question, Brian. Yes, and absolutely not. There are pockets of wealth and pockets where things have been painted and people are selling things. And then there are pockets of destruction and distress. And you can tell that the Cuban economy has had just a terrible effect on people's lives. Now, this visa that you talked about is called a people-to-people visa. So if you do get one, you simply have to say that you are coming to talk to people. This is not something that Congress has passed. This is an executive decision basically by Treasury and the State Department. But As far as tourism goes, the people here, one was making his trips in an antique car and bringing people in, getting them in, showing them the city. He said he made more yesterday by doing that in that car than he had all month working for the government.
Lauren Ashburn, thank you for that inside look in Havana this evening. We'll have more from you in days to come. Thank you. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The remaining presidential candidates will vie for more delegates tomorrow. Utah and Arizona hold primaries. Idaho has a Democratic caucus. For Republicans, the Arizona primary is winner take all. The Republican National Committee chair says he will be prepared for a contested convention in Cleveland this July. That could happen if no candidate wins enough delegates to earn the nomination on the first round of voting.
If it is a multi-ballot convention or an open convention or a contested convention, whatever word you want to use, we'll be prepared. And what happens is that you have a vote, and if no one gets a majority of the delegates on the floor, then you have another vote and another vote and another vote until somebody actually gets a majority.
Priebus says he does not support Donald Trump's argument that the candidate with the most delegates going into the convention should be automatically nominated. 4 of the 5 presidential candidates are speaking at a major pro-Israel conference. Our Jason Calvi is at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee Policy Conference tonight. Jason?
Brian, I'm in the nosebleed section of the Verizon Center. It's where Washington's hockey team and basketball teams play. But tonight, the main event, Donald Trump, John Kasich, and Ted Cruz will be speaking. Earlier today, it was Hillary Clinton who used her speech to take a couple veiled attacks on the GOP frontrunner. Back in February, Donald Trump said he was kind of a neutral guy on Israel.
Yes, we need steady hands, not a president who says he's neutral on Monday, pro-Israel on Tuesday, and who knows what on Wednesday, because everything's negotiable. Israel's security is non-negotiable.
And that's part of Democrats like Clinton ramping up attacks on the GOP frontrunner today. Donald Trump is using his opportunity to visit Washington, D.C. to meet with lawmakers today. Donald Trump spoke about the meeting at a press conference today at the future home of a luxury Trump hotel in D.C. Donald Trump says he's going to lay out his plan for Israeli and Palestinian peace, Middle East peace. He told that to ABC's This Week yesterday. He'll have an opportunity to address tens of thousands of people, about 18,000 gathering here at the Verizon Center. Like I said, I'm in the nosebleeds, and as I look down, people are filling in tonight to hear from the 3 GOP contenders that are remaining. And I also want to mention that there's a group of rabbis, about 40 of them, who are protesting the Donald Trump speech. They're planning not to attend. Brian?
Jason Calvi, thank you. And investigators in Russia say they're having trouble retrieving information from flight recorders on a jet that crashed this weekend. The Fly Dubai plane crashed Saturday in southern Russia, killing all 62 people aboard. It went down on its second landing attempt in strong winds. Searchers recovered the black boxes, but they're badly damaged. Investigators still trying to extract data from them. The Pope sent his condolences to the families of the victims. The Pope also says he is praying for bombing victims in Istanbul. Turkey blames the terror attack on an ISIS suicide bomber. Saturday's blast killed at least 4 people, including 2 Israeli Americans. Now investigators say they are searching for 3 more ISIS militants, reportedly planning more attacks. As the U.S. moves on its genocide declaration, one woman hopes raising her voice can help save people facing persecution by ISIS. Catherine Szeltner shares the Yezidi woman's story of survival.
22-year-old Nadia Murad speaks out after surviving the crime of crimes. In August 2014, ISIS terrorists captured her Yezidi village in northern Iraq, murdered her 6 brothers, her mother, and sold Nadia into sexual slavery. After months of torture, she escaped. In her native Kurdish tongue, Nadia recounts the horrors at the Holocaust Memorial Museum event today. She's quick to remind me she's not the only victim to undergo sexual assault at the hands of ISIS. Nadia says girls as young as 8 years old experience the same horrors. While in captivity, the days were long for Nadia. She says she had no option but to wait and see what happened. It's not the first time Nadia has shared her story. She's spoken with the president of Egypt, Greece, and last week she addressed the UN Security Council about ISIS.
Their aim was to eliminate all Yezidis.
Less than 24 hours later, Secretary of State John Kerry officially labeled ISIS violence against the Yezidis as genocide. But Nadia and her translator Abid, an American Yezidi, says this declaration is only a first step.
So it's important that people know, that and the international community know what is happening to the Yazidis and what the Yazidi women such as Nadia have experienced during their days and months in captivity.
Now a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Nadia believes it's her mission to be a voice for victims. She says she'll continue speaking out until the Yazidi areas are freed from ISIS and until justice has been carried out. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. President Obama expresses enormous hope for reconciliation between the U.S. and Cuba as he visits the island nation. His optimism faces a lot of criticism. Ana Quintana, policy analyst with the Heritage Foundation, says in granting unilateral concessions not conditioned upon human rights improvements, the U.S. has emboldened the Castro regime. Ana joins us tonight. Outline the human rights violations as you see them.
Well, I mean, just this year alone, we've seen close to 3,000 politically motivated arrests, right? Christian Solidarity Worldwide has documented the exploding cases of religious persecution. It's increased tenfold from 2014 to 2015. Originally, there were about 200 cases in 2014. Now it's up to 2,300 cases. Over 100 churches on the island just last year alone were demolished. I mean, if you look around the full gamut of every type of human rights violation that can occur, it's happening in Cuba, and it's happening right now with the president on the island.
Isn't the president's meeting with dissidents a step in the right direction?
I mean, I definitely think it's a step in the right direction, but I think it'll be insufficient if the president does not meet with people representing the full spectrum of civil society, from people who support the Castro regime to people who are vocal and open opponents of the regime. It can't just be people who the Cuban government has selected and approved.
We heard Lauren mention the American reporter asking Castro, why doesn't Cuba release political prisoners? He said, show me a list and I'll release them tonight. Could you show him a list?
I mean, Amnesty International has been documenting this. Human Rights Watch, various reputable international nonpartisan human rights groups. Today, the Cuban American National Foundation, one of the largest pro-democracy exile groups, Cuban exile groups, released a list of 47 verified political prisoners. So let's hope Raul Castro keeps to his word and releases these individuals.
Do you think the president will present him with that list?
God hope so. I pray that he does. But I mean, considering the fact that President Obama essentially legitimized Cuba's human rights violations during that press conference today, I see that as highly unlikely.
Wouldn't you and other Cuban Americans like to see Cuba move toward a democratic society, and how should the U.S. assist that?
I mean, the first thing that the president should have done, he needs to stop talking about, business opportunities and whatnot on the island. I mean, bringing a McDonald's to Cuba or a Walmart is not going to bring about political change. He should call for the Cuban government to hold elections. There's been 3 generations of Cubans who've never been able to elect their leader. And until the Cuban people have a government that's accountable to them, we're not going to see any sort of positive changes, whether political or economic, that benefit the Cuban people.
Election's certainly a good start for a democracy.
Exactly.
From the Heritage Foundation, Ana Quintana, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, the Holy Week message the Pope wants to send to people around the world. And standing up for the Little Sisters of the Poor, their call for prayer. Cardinals joined the Palm Sunday procession at the Vatican, marking the start of Holy Week. During Mass, the Pope stressed the importance of helping refugees. He later encouraged people to attend World Youth Day in Poland this summer. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and the Little Sisters of the Poor go before the Supreme Court Wednesday, seeking an exemption to the Obamacare contraceptive mandate. This weekend, the sisters gathered for a special holy hour, praying for a positive outcome, and our Wyatt Goolsby was there.
From the young to the old, dozens filled the Little Sisters of the Poor's chapel in Washington, D.C. to pray for religious liberty. The holy hour included hymns, benediction, and the rosary. the sisters dedicate their lives to living with and caring for the elderly poor. But now they worry the new healthcare law will force them to violate their beliefs.
Without a favorable outcome, our mission is really in jeopardy here with the elderly.
Sister Constance Veit laid out the sisters' argument in an op-ed in the New York Times over the weekend. The law requires the Little Sisters to offer a health care plan to their employees that provides birth control and other abortion-inducing drugs. The government argues that the sisters don't have to pay for those services they object to, but the sisters say they are still complicit by having a health care plan that does.
This is just our way of calling on his intercession, of course, and also witnessing to the world that, we really are seriously committed religious people. Our lives are based on faith.
In September, Pope Francis showed his support for the Little Sisters. His representative in the U.S., Archbishop Carlo Vigano, prayed alongside the sisters this weekend.
The greatness of this country has been built on the religious freedom. So if this country wants to lead the world in freedom, should give the freedom of religion to all its citizens, especially those who want their own conscience to be respected.
The Little Sisters are calling on all people of goodwill to pray, not only for their case, but for all those who wish to participate fully in society as people of faith. The Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in the Little Sisters case, which will be presented together with 6 others. Hundreds of religious women, college students, and clergy are expected to rally in front of the courthouse as a sign of support. Brian?
And we'll be praying with them. Thank you, Wyatt. Cuban Americans are closely watching President Obama's Cuba visit. Some are critical of it. Dr. Grazie Christie is policy advisor for the Catholic Association. She is joining us from Miami. I know you keep in touch with Cubans on the island and, of course, Cuban Americans there in the Miami area. What are you hearing from them about the president's visit?
Cubans here and on the island are feeling a little sad about the visit. We think it's a huge missed opportunity for President Obama to demand real concessions from the regime and real good things for the Cuban people.
What would you say is the religious climate, the freedom of religion there in Cuba right now?
Well, it's extremely limited. People are allowed to go to church, but Catholics are not allowed to educate their children properly. And the resources for the Catholic Church are incredibly scarce. The churches are in ruins. And there's also discrimination against people who practice their faith.
When Fidel Castro came to power, your parents came to the United States. What do they think of President Obama, our president, reaching out in this friendly way to Raul Castro?
Well, it's devastating for them to see the president of the free world take the time to, fly 90 miles over there and shake the hand of a dictator who has zero respect for the rights of the citizens of his own country. It's very difficult for us.
As an American who is of Cuban descent, what would you like to see President Obama say to Mr. Castro?
I'd like him to ask for even just the most basic freedoms that Americans enjoy, the freedom to associate freely, to enjoy their religion and practice it, their freedom to go online on the internet and find the real truth about the world and where they stand in it. Even just the most basic things we'd like him to ask for.
Are you, maybe your parents and your friends who are close to the Cuban people, are you hopeful at all that this could affect some kind of positive change for them?
I'm sorry to say that we think that the cause of Cuban freedom has been set back by this trip, not forwarded.
Well, we can all pray that something good can come out of it. Dr. Grazie Christie, we appreciate you joining us from Miami by Skype. Have a good Holy Week and a happy Easter.
Thank you very much. You too.
Up next, more one-on-one with Cardinal Pell. He describes what it's like to work directly with the Pope. And gaining followers, how Pope Francis plans to use his new Instagram account. Today is World Down Syndrome Day, raising awareness of the genetic disorder. It's an important pro-life issue, helping parents choose life over abortion when their baby is diagnosed with Down syndrome. This promotional video ends with the statement, "People with Down syndrome can live a happy life." Thanks for joining us on this Monday evening, the 21st of March. I'm Brian Patrick. Australia's Cardinal George Pell heads the Vatican's financial reforms. He recently testified before an Australian Royal Commission investigating clergy sex abuse in his native land. Our Rome producer Mary Shovlain talked with him about his encounter with abuse survivors.
I had a meeting with a number of the survivors from all the survivors who came from my hometown of Ballarat. That went much better than I ever anticipated, and they're hoping to try to set up some sort of a centre to help survivors, to discourage people from even thinking of suicide, and I'm committed to helping them if I can.
Yeah, I met some of them, were able to speak with some of them, and after you met with them, and they were very, touched and moved. And
what was said is confidential, but most of them embraced me when they were leaving, so I was very moved by that.
I wanted to talk to you because we're beginning the third, we've celebrated the third anniversary of Pope Francis's pontificate, a pontificate that has shown itself to be one of reform. 3 years into this amazing pontificate, what has been done in terms of reform? What's good that's going on right now?
Well, I think there's a lot of good things that is going on. We're reformed-minded, we're not revolutionaries. And the Catholic Church is like a great ocean liner. It's difficult to get it to change course. It takes time. And often the image of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, is filtered through a left-wing prism, so that when he speaks in favour of marriage, when he speaks against abortion, when he speaks about the devil, the spirit of evil, the impossibility of women priests, that often doesn't get through. The speed of reform is not spectacular, but we've made significant progress in the financial areas.
You're also a part of the C9, we call it the C9, the Council of Cardinals. How has it been working with your brother cardinals on that, and with Pope Francis and being one of his closest advisors?
Well, it's an enormous privilege, and I think there's a very good spirit amongst us cardinals and the Holy Father. We can say what we want to say. The Holy Father is a very good listener, and you can't tell from his faith whether he approves or disapproves, so that leaves people to say what they want to. I mean, there are moments of differences, of course. That's what we're there for. A number of us have known one another for years, but not all the group. And it's, I think, a marvellous example of the universal church at work. I'd like to thank all listeners of EWTN for their prayers and support.
Your Eminence, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much.
Well, it didn't take long for Pope Francis to gain 1 million followers on Instagram. The Pope launched his account just on Saturday on the Feast of St. Joseph. He started by posting a picture of himself asking for prayer. The Vatican says the Pope's Instagram account will allow people to share gestures of tenderness and mercy.
It was a Feast of St. Joseph. He said St. Joseph is strong and courageous, but he's also very tender. The world needs more tenderness. The Pope on Instagram is a way of trying to show that.
And the fact that images transcend languages and cultures means that he can speak to each and every person equally. It's very exciting.
The Pope's Instagram account is under the name Franciscus. He already has more than 26 million followers on Twitter. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight revisiting the beautiful outdoor Palm Sunday Mass at the Vatican. Good night, and may God bless you.